Understanding the COSO Internal Control Framework was a game changer for me. I've been in boardrooms discussing serious risk and compliance matters with some of the most important CEOs and decision makers around.
You can compare the figure at the top of page 13.
Jared is a little early for all that. Just speak to me in plain English.
Okay.
And that's where COSO comes in, because it ties the objectives of the business with risk, compliance, and governance. I'm Kevin. I've been in risk and compliance for over 15 years, from head of audit and banking in New York to chief risk and compliance officer at a fintech in Europe. I've experienced the pain points and learned what really works to both stay compliant and on top of the risk. In this video, we'll go over what controls and internal controls are with some practical examples. We'll tie that into the actual definitions in COSO, and at the end, I'll give you some practical advice on how you can use COSO going forward. If you try reading about COSO, you're probably left with more questions than answers. There's a long definition, which we'll get back into later, and there's this colorful cube, the COSO cube. But let's start with control. What do we mean with the word control in this context? An easy explanation could be that controls are activities that take care of something, and this something is usually a risk of some sort. Let's look at some examples. So it's a chilly night and you want to go outside and get some food. So you put on a nice warm coat and you step out of your apartment. That's a control. To reduce the risk of you catching a cold, you put on this nice warm coat in order to basically not get a cold. Or take this example. Before going to bed every night, you make sure to turn off all your lights and lock the front door to your apartment. These are activities that you would perform to reduce the risk of someone entering your apartment at night and also to reduce your electricity bill. If you put it on a post-it note and put it on your kitchen table, reminding your partner to also lock the door or turn off all the lights before going to bed, you've documented your controls. In addition, if you ask your partner before going to bed if they remember to lock the door and to turn off all the lights, then you've also established a reporting mechanism here as well. Your goal is to ensure safety and make sure that your bills are low. So now that we've established what controls are, what is internal control? So internal control is just a system to make sure all the activities that are supposed to take care of something are being done, that they're documented to make them predictable so that other people can do it, and to make sure that there's some sort of reporting in this. Whatever activities that you perform also align with whatever goals and targets you may have and are also within any rules and regulations. Now, let's compare this to the actual official definition of internal control in COSO. A process affected by an entity's board of directors, management, and other personnel designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives related to operations, reporting, and compliance. See how it all makes sense? Now let's apply this concept to a company or an organization. So typically you would have the CEO, and the CEO would be responsible for all the day-to-day activities and making sure that the company or organization meets its goals and targets. Obviously the CEO is just one person, so the CEO hires different people and a organizational structure to make sure that all the activities are being performed, and usually these people would have different roles and responsibilities. Usually in these structures there would be some sort of reporting mechanisms in place as well to ensure that the CEO has all the information so that he or she could pass on this information to the owners of a company, generally comprised in a board of directors. The board of directors would have the final say on any goals and targets that the CEO proposes. And why would that be? The owners put money into the company and they want to see that money grow. And the way that that money can grow is by the company itself achieving its goals and targets. In return, the board usually gives a set of policies to the CEO that they want the company to adhere to. And these policies are generally a bit high level, but what they do is that they give some sort of requirements to the company. Now, these could be that you have to ensure that you follow all the rules and regulations, or that you do things as efficiently as possible, or things of that nature. The CEO would then take these policies, break these down into standards or desktop procedures, and periodically report to the board how the company is doing in achieving its goals and targets, any risks to these, and what activities or controls are in place to reduce these risks. Now that that's covered, let's go back to the COSO cube. So on the cube's left side, you would see entity level, division, operating unit, and function. And basically what this means is that the COSO framework applies all throughout the company or the organization. On top, you would see operations, reporting, and compliance. And this means that internal control framework applies to all of the operations, all of the reporting, and to ensure compliance with rules and regulations. And then we go into the 5 key components of internal control. So the first internal control component is the control environment. The board and the management's tone at the top. The people in the company conduct themselves. Policies are adhered to, and making sure that everyone is doing the right thing is enforced throughout the company. And I cannot stress how important management and tone at the top is when it comes to internal controls in a company. The second internal control component is risk assessments. So these are identifying and assessing risks that may hinder a company reaching its goals and targets. Examples of these could be broad. So they could be risks relating to your key people, products, or your main processes like product development or sales. Or it can also be another company coming into your market and same product that you have. The third internal control component are the control activities. Now these would comprise of all the policies and standards and desktop procedures that you have that ensures predictability and that things are actually documented to ensure that the risks are mitigated. It could be having 2 people check every payment that is going out of the company to ensure that there's no fraud taking place. So all of these controls in your activities should be documented and also tested throughout. The fourth component is information and communication. Information coming from the CEO should be easily dispersed and understood in all parts of the company or organization. Things that are happening in different parts of the company and all of these meeting places and structures that are usually in place in a company. The fifth component is monitoring activities. Now these activities could be baked into your company already, like management following up if certain control activities are being performed, or they could be external activities, so a third-party auditor coming in and making sure that all the controls are working and that people know what they're supposed to do and that everything is working fine. How can you use COSO in your work? Well, first, I would start with conducting a gap assessment where you use the 5 internal control components of COSO and map that to your existing business. Also, I would highly recommend that you try to embed controls into different and existing business processes. For instance, if you have a procurement process in place, adding some more controls into that, more assessment steps of your suppliers into your existing procurement policy, rather than establishing a whole new standalone third-party risk management process. If you want to understand COSO more, I would highly recommend that you actually go into the COSO website and read the framework itself. But now that we do understand COSO, let's move into risk assessments, because it's all well and good if you understand controls, but it doesn't really mean that much if you don't understand your risks. Now in this video, I'm talking about risk assessments and why it's not as complex as some people might think.